We continue now at the top of Daf Nun Amud Aleph in Meseches Bava Kamma. This is Bava Kamma Daf 50a. The Gemara is explaining the machlokus between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yishmael in terms of bor b'reshuso. The Gemara says bebor b'reshuso, the machlokus between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yishmael is when a person digs a pit in his own reshus. Rabbi Akiva savar bor b'reshuso nami chayev. Rabbi Akiva holds not only is a bor in reshus harabim, that's obviously chayev, but even a bor in his own reshus is chayev. Techsiv, because it's written in the pasuk Baal habor, it says the owner of the bor, bebor de islay bailim. That implies that the Torah is talking about a bor that has bailim, a pit that has owners. Rabbi Yishmael savar, but Rabbi Yishmael holds Baal hatakola. All the pasuk means is the person who owns the stumbling block, who created the stumbling block, but it's not talking about a bor b'reshuso. Again, according to Rabbi Yishmael, it's talking about a bor b'reshus harabim. And the Gemara continues, Elamai zehu bor ha'amor b'Torah dekama Rabbi Akiva. What does it mean when Rabbi Akiva says this is the bor that is written in the Torah? Meaning to say, if Rabbi Akiva holds that both bor b'reshus harabim and bor b'reshuso are examples of bor, so what does it mean that this, meaning bor b'reshuso, is the bor of the Torah? What it means is as follows: Zehu bor shepasach bo hakasav techila l'tashlumin. This is the bor that the Torah begins with when it talks about payment. And Rashi explains Baal HaTakola, again, according to Rabbi Yishmael, when it says the Baal HaBor, it means the Baal HaTakola, the one who created the stumbling block. Uliyolam b'reshus harabim, and again, according to Rabbi Yishmael, we're really talking about in reshus harabim. Aval b'reshuso, but if it's in his own reshus, according to Rabbi Yishmael, aval pi shehifker, even though he made that reshus ownerless that people can go there, pater, he's still going to be pater, according to Rabbi Yishmael, kedefarishis, as was explained. Haidinakat v'lo hifker boro, and Rashi points out that which we're saying, that the person made the reshus ownerless but not the bor, dim hifker af boro havale bor b'reshus harabim, because if the person would make everything ownerless, even the bor, then it would already be the equivalent, it would be exactly the same as a bor b'reshus harabim. And then the Gemara said, Umay zehu de Rabbi Akiva. The Gemara said, according to Rabbi Akiva, what does it mean zehu, if Rabbi Akiva essentially says that both bor b'reshus harabim and bor b'reshuso is chayiv? B'shalom zehu de Rabbi Yishmael l'mu'ute de Rabbi Akiva. I understand the zehu of Rabbi Yishmael, it's saying this, a bor b'reshus harabim is the bor of the Torah, and not bor b'reshus, so it excludes Rabbi Akiva. Elazeu de Rabbi Akiva l'mu'ute mai. What is the zehu of Rabbi Akiva excluding? Ha-bor b'reshus harabim nami omer b'Torah kededarshinan. According to Rabbi Akiva, bor b'reshus harabim is also something that is said in the Torah. And the Gemara answered to that, l'tashlumin, we're talking about the fact that this is the first bor that is mentioned, l'tashlumin. Bor de islay bailim nemar etzel tashlumin, meaning a bor with an owner, that's what is mentioned by tashlumin. Kedechsiv, Baal habor yishalem, that's what the pasuk says. Baal habor yishalem talks about the Baal habor, the owner. That's the first bor that is mentioned in terms of tashlumin. Bor b'reshus harabim nemar etzel hanizakin, and bor b'reshus harabim, there it mentions that in terms of damages. Kedechsiv, like it's written in the pasuk, yiftach ish v'chiyichra ish v'nafal shama v'gomer, talks about opening and digging a pit and something falls in there and there is damage. V'hachi Kamma Rabbi Akiva, what Rabbi Akiva is saying is as follows: Amai patart bebor b'reshuso. Why are you, Rabbi Yishmael, saying bor b'reshuso is pater? V'alo zeu bor ha'amar b'Torah etzel tashlumin. Isn't this the bor that's identified in the Torah when it talks about payment? And all of this was the approach of Rabba in explaining the machlokas Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yishmael. And now the Gemara offers a different approach. For Rav Yosef, Rav Yosef says, bebor b'reshus hayachid kuli alma lo pligi d'mechayiv. On the contrary, it's by a bor b'reshus hayachid that there is no argument. There, everybody agrees chayiv. My time, and what's the reason? Baal habor amar achmona, because again, the pasuk says Baal habor, and that implies bebor de islay bailam askinan, that we're talking about a bor that has owners. And ki pligi, and when do Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva argue? On the contrary, they argue bebor b'reshus harabim. They argue by bor b'reshus harabim. Rabbi Yishmael savar bor b'reshus harabim nami chayiv. Rabbi Yishmael says a bor b'reshus harabim is also chayiv. Dechsiv ki yiftach v'chiyichra, again, because the pasuk says that if the person opens the pit or if the person digs the pit, and we make the drush as we did before, im al psicha chayiv al kriya lo kol shekain, if a person is chayiv for opening a pit, most certainly he'd be chayiv on digging the pit. What does the pasuk even need to talk about that for? Ela shal iskei psicha v'al iskei kriya bolo. Rather, what the pasuk means is just the opening, just the digging, that's enough to be a mechayiv, meaning to say even, according to Rabbi Yishmael, even bor b'reshus harabim is going to be chayiv. Rabbi Akiva, now Rabbi Akiva responds, you can't learn from ki yiftach v'chiyichra anything about bor b'reshus harabim, because hanu mitzrach tzrichi, because both of these terms are needed. It needs to talk about ki yiftach, it needs to talk about ki yichra. Why? The kasav rachmana ki yiftach, because if the pasuk only said that when a person opens a pit, hava amina, so then I would have thought poseach hu desagile bekisoy, that if a person opens it where it's enough just to cover it up. So maybe that's the situation where you're going to be chayiv, but kora lo sagile bekisa, but maybe if you dig the pit, it's not enough just to cover it up, because here you actually made the pit from nothing, there was nothing there, and you dug the pit. I might have thought at the time that you actually have to fill that kind of a pit to be potter. I might have thought that because of Rachmana ki yichra, and if the pasuk wrote just ki yichra, hava amina, then I would have thought kriyahu deboy kisoy mishum da'avid ma'isa, when a person digs, so then it needs to be covered up because he did something, avol posech, but when it comes to just opening a pit that's already there, to lo avid ma'isa, that he didn't do a ma'isa, ema kisoy nami lo boy, I might think that you don't even need to have a kisoy, kamash mulan, and so that's why that's what the pasuk teaches us, by saying both ki yiftach and ki yichra, and therefore again, according to Rabbi Akiva, it has nothing to do with bor b'rishas harabim. That's not why it says ki yiftach v'ki yichra, rather both terms are actually needed. And the Gemara continues, Vela mai zehu bor ha'amar b'torah dekam Rabbi Yishmael, but according to this approach of Rabbi Yosef, what does it mean that this is the pit that the Torah talks about according to Rabbi Yishmael? Because again, according to Rabbi Yishmael, it now emerges that a person is chayiv by both bor b'rishuso and by bor b'rishas harabim. And the Gemara explains, zehu bor shapasach bo akasav techila l'nizak, and Rabbi Yishmael will explain, this is the pit that the pasuk first talks about in terms of nizakin, meaning this case of a bor b'rishas harabim. That's what the pasuk is referring to when it talks about nizakin, when it talks about damages. That's what Rabbi Yishmael is responding to Rabbi Akiva. But ein achinami, according to Rabbi Yishmael, the person is chayiv both by bor b'rishas harabim and by bor b'rishuso. And Rashi explains, Hanu mitzrach tzrichi, again, according to Rabbi Akiva, both terms are necessary, both the term ki yiftach and ki yichre, uliolam b'rishas hayachid, and of course, really, we're talking here about a bor b'rishas hayachid, v'hifkir rishuso v'lo bora, where the person makes his property ownerless, but not the pit itself, the havale mimono shehizik, then it's his property that caused the damage, chayiv, that's the case where the person is going to be chayiv, again, only, according to Rabbi Akiva, only by a bor b'rishuso, mishum dekarinan be bal habor, because then the person is referred to as the bal habor, avol b'rishas harabim, the lav mamono who potter, but in Rishus Harabim, according to Rabbi Akiva, where it's not his mammon, it's not his property, he's going to be potter. The toim yistom v'yamaliyafar, again, you might have thought that you actually have to fill it up with dirt. It's not enough just to cover up a pit that the person dug. And Rashi continues, Umay zehu de Rabbi Yishmael, again, according to Rabbi Yosef, what's the zehu of Rabbi Yishmael? Hoel ulididei tarvayo ksivi, because again, according to Rabbi Yosef's version of Rabbi Yishmael, both types of boros are written in the pasuk, both bor b'rishus harabim and bor b'rishuso. So why does it say zehu? And the Gemara answered linizak, and the Gemara said the reason why we talk about bor b'rishus harabim, this is the bor in the Torah, means this is the bor that the Torah identified in terms of damages. Bor b'rishus harabim pasach bo hakasav tchila kishadiber benizko. Bor b'rishus harabim is what the pasuk was talking about when it talked about the damage that occurs. V'nafal shama shor chamor. When it says again, v'nafal shama shor chamor, bor b'rishus harabim diber bo hakasav ki yiftach v'chiyirchre v'nafal. It's talking there about a bor b'rishus harabim because it says he opens the pit or he digs the pit and it falls there. And Rashi points out, v'i kasha. Now, if you're going to ask masnisin money, so who's the author of our Mishnah? Because our Mishnah clearly says both bor b'rishuso and bor b'rishus harabim are chayiv. So that's going to depend on which amora. Rabba muki lak Rabbi Akiva. Rabba will say that our Mishnah follows Rabbi Akiva, the mechayiv ar tarvayu, because according to Rabbi, it's Rabbi Akiva who says both kind of boros are chayiv. For Rav Yosef mukilak Rabbi Yishmael, and Rav Yosef will say the opposite. He'll say it's Rabbi Yishmael, because according to Rav Yosef, it's Rabbi Yishmael who says that both kind of boros are chayiv. And the Gemara continues. Meisvei, we have a question from the following brisa: Hachover bor b'rishus harabim upischol l'rishus hayachid. If somebody digs a pit in rishus harabim and the opening of the pit is in rishus hayachid, essentially this is a bor b'rishuso. So potter in that situation, the person is potter. V'ava b'she'eno rashoy lasos. Now, even though the person is not really allowed to do that, because you're not allowed to make a cavity, you're not allowed to dig underneath the Rishus Harabim, so it's not allowed to do that, but still it's going to be potter. According to the first part of this brisa, a bor b'rishuso is potter. Hachofer boros shichna ma'aros, if somebody digs pits or cisterns or different kinds of caves, b'rishus hayachid and rishus hayachid, upischol l'rishus harabim, and it opens into Rishus Harabim, chayiv is chayiv. So here the brisa is saying a bor b'rishus harabim is chayiv. And finally, the brisa says, "V'achofer boros b'rishus hayachid." If somebody digs boros in Rishus hayachid, has smuchol Rishus Harabim, but it's nearby the Rishus Harabim. So this is really again a bor b'rishuso that's near the Rishus Harabim. Kagon elu hachofrim leushin, like the people who dig for the foundations of their building, potter. So in that situation, potter. So here it once again seems to be saying that bor b'rishuso is going to be potter, but it's only because it's done leushin. Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda mechayiv, and Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda says no, it's actually chayiv in that case of bor bor b'reshuso, ad sheyasa mechitza asaro, ad sheyarchik mimakom drisas raglei adam, umimakom drisas raglei behema arba, unless the person makes a wall that is 10 tefachim high, or at least he distances it from the area where people and animals walk, at least arba tefachim, at least 4 tefachim. And so the Gemara now makes an inference from the end of this brisa. Again, the end of this brisa had a case of bor b'reshuso, which is pater. But the Gemara says, time of dilution, the only reason at the end of the brisa that bor b'reshuso is pater is because of the fact that it was done for the foundation of the building. That seems to be the exemption. Halav lution, but if not for the fact that it was for the foundation of the building, chayiv, apparently bor b'reshuso, would be chayiv. So in other words, at the end of this brisa, even though at the beginning of the brisa, bor b'reshuso seems to be pater, the end of the brisa seems to be saying bor b'reshuso is chayiv. And so the Gemara says, money. So who exactly is the author of the various parts of this brisa? B'shalom l'Rabba. Now I understand according to Rabba, because according to Rabba, that was the first approach in terms of the machlokas between Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Akiva. Everybody agreed when it came to bor b'reshus harabim, and there's a machlokas by bor b'reshuso. So you simply say Reisha Rabbi Shmuel. According to Rabba, the Reisha is Rabbi Shmuel that bor b'reshuso is pater. V'sever Rabbi Akiva, in the end of the brayso is Rabbi Akiva that bor b'reshuso is chayiv. Elul Rav Yosef, but according to Rav Yosef said that everybody agreed bor b'reshuso is chayiv, and so therefore how do we explain it? B'shalom Seif, I understand the end of the brayso divrei hakol, that follows everybody because everybody agrees according to Rav Yosef bor b'reshuso is chayiv. Elul Reisha, but when it comes to the beginning of the brayso, which is saying bor b'reshuso is pater, so that doesn't make any sense according to Rav Yosef because everybody agrees bor b'reshuso is chayiv. Money, who's the author of that part of the brayso? Lo Rabbi Yishmael, v'lo Rabbi Akiva. It's not going to be Rabbi Yishmael or Rabbi Akiva. How does Rav Yosef explain a portion of the brayso which says that bor b'reshuso is going to be pater? That doesn't make sense. Again, according to Rav Yosef, bor b'reshuso should always be chayiv according to all shitas. And the Gemara says, Amar lach Rav Yosef will respond to you as follows. This is how he will interpret this brayso. Kula divrei hakol. Actually, this brayso follows everybody. It follows Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Akiva, the entire brayso. And so therefore, why is the brayso making this distinction and saying bor b'reshuso in the beginning it seems to be pater, at the end it seems to be chayiv? V'reisha, so the reisha, that beginning of the brayso where it says pater, shelo hifker lo reshuso v'lo boro. The case actually is where he didn't make ownerless his property or the bor, meaning nobody had any business being in his property, and that's why in that particular case we're going to say pater. And Rashi explains v'tayim delusion again at the end of the brayso. The reason why we say pater is because the digging was for the foundation of a building. Shederech lasos kain, that's a normal thing to do. Ve'eno poshay, it's not considered negligence. Halav lu'ushin chayiv. The implication is that if it's not lu'ushin, if it's not made for the foundation of the building, so then it would be chayiv. Alma bor b'reshuso chayiv. You see at the end of the brayso, bor b'reshuso is chayiv. V'kasha reisha l'seifa. We then have a contradiction between the beginning of the brayso and the end of the brayso. And so the Gemara then said, according to Rabbah, it's fine. Reisha de katani bor b'reshuso pater Rabbi Shmuel, because the reisha which says bor b'reshuso is pater is Rabbi Shmuel. The seifa de mechayiv, and the seifa which said bor b'reshuso is chayiv, the daikin on halav lu'ushin chayiv Rabbi Akiva, because we made this diuk that if it wasn't for the foundation be chayiv, that's Rabbi Akiva who says that bor b'reshuso is chayiv. Elul Rav Yosef damar bor b'reshuso de kuli al mechayiv, but according to Rav Yosef, everybody agrees that bor b'reshuso is chayiv. Reisha de katani pater money. How do you understand the reisha of the brayso that bor b'reshuso is pater? And the Gemara said lo reshuso v'lo bor. We will just understand the reisha to be a case where he didn't even make his reshus hefker. Diamar le b'reshusai, my boys. He could say to him, "What are you even doing in my property?" That's why he's pater on this bor b'reshuso. V'itzrich lashmin, and Rashi points out the brayso needs to teach this because what's the chiddush? Of course, he should be pater if the person shouldn't be in his property. The afagav deino rashoy lasos came. The chiddush is even though he's really not allowed to do this, deinos and chalal tachas reshus haravim, because we already said you're not allowed to dig a cavity underneath of the reshus haravim. Miu hoel v'lereshuso pischo pater, but nevertheless, since the opening is in his reshus, he's going to be pater because again he could say, "What are you doing in my property?" And the Gemara continues, Amar Ravashi says, Hashta du ukimto l'Rav Yosef l'divrei hakol. Now that we said that the brayso according to Rav Yosef follows everybody, meaning follows both Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva, l'Rabba nami lo tukma ketanoi. According to Rabba also, we don't need to say that different parts of the brayso are following different tanoim. Rather, midureish Rabbi Yishmael, from the fact that the beginning of the brayso, which says bor b'reshuso is pater, from the fact that that is following Rabbi Yishmael, according to Rabba, seifa nami Rabbi Yishmael. The end of the brayso is also following Rabbi Yishmael. And Ravashi explains, v'taima delusion. Again, the only reason why in the Sefer we say pater is because it's dug for the foundation of the building. Halav leushin chayiv. But again, we make the inference that if it's not for the foundation of a building, then the person would be chayiv. Apparently, we're saying bor b'reshuso is chayiv. Why should that be the case? Again, if we're following Rabbi Shmuel, within Rabba Shmuel says bor b'reshuso is pater. How do we explain the end of the brisa? And the answer could be kagon da'arvich arvuche l'reshus harabim. The case is over here that it stretched, it widened into the reshus harabim, and Rashi explains da'arvich ba'arvuche l'reshus harabim dahavalei chofer bor b'reshus harabim. In other words, even though he was digging in his own reshus for the foundation of the building, but it actually extended, it did go somewhat into the reshus harabim. V'hilkach taima delusion, and that's why in this particular situation he's chayiv. The only reason it's pater is because he was doing it for the foundation. Halav leushin chayiv. If it wasn't done for the foundation, then indeed it would be chayiv, even according to Rabbi Shmuel, because it is in reshus harabim. And the Gemara continues, Meisvei, we have a question from another brisa, hachofer bor b'reshus hayachid u'pischol l'reshus harabim. If somebody digs a pit in reshus hayachid and the opening of the pit is in reshus harabim, chayiv, he's going to be chayiv. Again, that's a case of bor b'reshus harabim, which is chayiv. B'reshus hayachid hasmuchol l'reshus harabim, but if he digs in reshus hayachid that's near reshus harabim, so then pater, he's going to be pater. Again, that seems to be saying that bor b'reshuso is pater. And the Gemara says, b'shalom al Rabba. Again, it makes sense according to Rabba. Kula Rabbi Yishmael, we simply say the entire brisa is Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Yishmael makes exactly this distinction. A bor b'reshus harabim is going to be chayiv, and a bor b'reshuso is going to be pater. Elul Rav Yosef, but according to Rav Yosef, so bishlam areisha Rabbi Yishmael. I understand the beginning, which talks about bor b'reshus harabim. So there we say, if you have a situation of bor b'reshus harabim, it's chayiv. According to Rav Yosef, Rabbi Yishmael is the one that says that bor b'reshus harabim is chayiv. Ela seifa, but when it comes to the seifa and it says a bor b'reshuso is pater, money lo Rabbi Yishmael lo Rabbi Akiva, that's not going to be anybody. It's not Rabbi Yishmael or Rabbi Akiva, because again, according to Rav Yosef, everyone should agree that bor b'reshuso is chayiv, and here it's saying bor b'reshuso is pater. And the Gemara answers to that, Amar Lach, he will say to you, b'chofer lu'ushin v'divrei hakol, simply say the end of the brisa here is talking about where the digging was done for the foundation of a building, and that's why it's pater. Everybody agrees that if it's done for the foundation of a building, then the person is in fact exempt. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. Tanu Rabban, and the rabbis taught, Chafar upasach umasar l'ravim. Let's say he digs and he opens this pit, but he gives it over to the ravim. He gives it over to the public. Pater. So in that case, he's going to be pater. Chafar upasach v'lo masar l'ravim. But if he digs, if he opens the pit and he doesn't give it over to the public, chayiv, he's going to be chayiv. And Rashi explains, Umasar l'rabim, he gives it over to the public. The Amar livnei iro, what he does is, he says to the people of his city, Habor zeh shechafarti, this pit which I just dug, tzarech lachem lishtos mei geshamim, that's really for you, in order to collect the rainwater. Hamiskansen sham, you could drink the rainwater that collects there. Uru'uya lishtos behemos man, and animals can drink from them. Harehu masar lachem, I'm giving it over to you, essentially donating my work to you, and giving you the bor. So in that situation, he's going to be pater, but if he doesn't do that, he's going to be chayiv. And the brisa continues, V'chein menhago shel Nechunya chofer boros shichna moros. This was the custom of Nechunya, who used to dig these pits and these cisterns and the caves. Shayach chofer uposeach umosar l'abim. He would dig, he would open, and he would give it over to the public. Ucheshasham chachamim bedavar. When the chachamim heard of this, Amru, they said, Kayim zeh halacha zu. This person fulfilled this particular halacha. The Gemara says, halacha zu v'sulo, what? He only fulfilled this halacha and nothing else. Elaima af halacha zu, rather means he even fulfilled this halacha. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. Tanu Rabban, and the rabbis taught, Maisa bebito shel Nechunya chofer shichin. There was an incident with the daughter of Nechunya, who again used to dig these ditches. Shenafel lebor gadol, that she fell into a large pit. Bo vahudiu as Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa. They went and they let Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa know that this had occurred. Shari Shon, in the first hour, Amar lahem, he said to them, Shalom, everything's at peace, everything is fine. Shani, in the second hour, Amar lahem Shalom, he also said, at peace, everything is fine. And Shlishis, in the third hour, Amar lahem, he said to them, also, she has already ascended from this pit. Amrullah, they said to her, Mihelech, who's the one that brought you up from the pit? Amr lahem, she said to them, Zachar shel rechelim nizdaminli, there was a male sheep, there was a ram that appeared to me. V'zakein echad manhigo, and there was an elderly person who was leading it. They say that the elderly person, that's a reference to Avraham. That's what Rashi says. Zachar shel rechelim elo shel Yitzchak. Zachar shel rechelim refers to the ram of Yitzchak. V'zakein manhigo Avram, that refers to the elder that was leading this ram. That refers to Avram. And so she said, Avram appeared to me. and he led me out of the pit. He brought me out of this pit. Amru lo, so they said to him, meaning to say, they said to Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa, Naviat, are you a prophet? How did you know that she got out of the pit? Amar Lemi said to them, Lo Navi Anochi, v'lo ben Navi Anochi. I'm not a prophet, I'm not the son of a prophet. Elakach amarti, rather what I said to myself was, Davar she'oso tzaddik mitzdoyer, both something which this tzaddik took such care for, digging pits for the public. Yikoshel bozaro, do you think that his children would stumble over it? And therefore I knew that she would in fact be saved. Rabbi Acha says, nevertheless, Meis beno Batsama, still the son of Nechunya Chofer Shichin, he died in thirst. Shenemar, as it says, Usvivav Nesara Ma'od, it says those who surround him. The idea over here is that they're dealt with Kechut Hasara, says Rashi. They're dealt with very strictly those who are close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Melamed HaKadosh Baruch Hu medaktek im Sevivav afilu Kechut Hasara. That shows that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is very careful with those who are Sevivav, those who surround him, those who are close to him, even the amount of a hair's breadth. Rabbi Nechunya Amar Mehacha, Rabbi Nechunya says, we learn this idea from here. Kel Narotz Besod Kedoshim Rabba V'Nora Kol Sevivav. Again, it says HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Nora Kol Sevivav. He is feared by all who surround him, all who are close to him. Again, HaKadosh Baruch Hu deals more strictly with those individuals. And Rashi explains, Chofer Shichin, again, Nechunya would dig these ditches, La'ole Regalim B'drachim, it was for the benefit of those who were Ole Regalim, who were going up for the holiday to Yerushalayim. Shah Rishon, in the first hour, he said, Shadain hi Ru'uya Leoschaya, where she's still able to survive, to be alive, Beso Chamayim, in the water, he said, Amar Lem Shalom, he said, everything is good, Tala, that shall come up, V'chein Shni, and also the second, Shlishis Dahavel Asho, Shatetze Nafsh, already by the third hour, where she could have died, Im Yesh Nasham, had she remained there, Amar Lehen, so then he said to them, Kvar also Vadai, she certainly has ascended already. It was obvious to him that she wouldn't die there. And again, as we said, Zachar Shel Re'elim refers to the Elo Shel Yitzchak, and Zakin Manhigo refers to Avraham. And the answer was Mitztayarbo, something that he took the trouble, Lachvar Borus Umorus La'ole Regalim. He dug these pits and caves for the Ole Regalim. You think that he would stumble, or his children would stumble over that, but nevertheless, Im Sevivav, with those who are around him, Tzadikim Hadvekim Bo, the Tzadikim who cling to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Nisara Ma'od. So the pasuk said Usvivav Nisara Ma'od. It's a storm. It's very stormy. Lashon Chut Hasaro, but we darshan it to mean again like a hair's breadth. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is medaktek. V'noral Kol Sevivav. Then the pasuk quoted the other pasuk of Noral Kol Sevivav. Those who surround him again are dealt with in this kind of fear. Matel Emas Mishpotav Aleihim. The fear of his judgment is upon them. And the Gemara continues. Amar Rabbi Chanina says, Kol Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu Vatron, who anyone who says HaKadosh Baruch Hu is forgiving, Yivasru Chayev, so his life should be like hefker. He's not going to be protected. Shenemar, as it says, Hatzur Tamim Pa'alo Ki Chol Derachav Mishpat. It says by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, all of his ways are justice. He's not just forgiving. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Chana v'yitem Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmeni. Rabbi Chana says, and some say it's Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmeni who says, Ma'id Chsiv, what does it mean when it's written in the pasuk? And Rashi explains, Vatron lavar al kol pisham. Again, Vatron means he's forgiving. He ignores all of the sins. Anyone who says that, Yivasru chayev, Yufkru chayev, his life should be like hefker. V'gufo, and his body also should be like hefker. Again, he'll be like unprotected. Shemore labrios lachto, because by saying that, he's essentially teaching people that they should sin. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Nun Amud Beis.